Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L. Now let's talk My Hero Academia chapter 156. Hey guys, alright, cool. This chapter, My Hero Academia. Let's get into it. Before that, I want to mention something about a Discord server. A lovely subscriber made one for the Tripl-L subscribers and whatnot. So if you want more information on that, stay tuned until the end of the video. And yeah, okay, anyway, the chapter. The Rescuee's Power, or whatever it was called. So, if there was one word that I could say to describe my feelings on initially reading the chapter, it would be anticlimactic. What we ultimately got with Eri was just something that I would not have expected. That was totally out of left field. Depending on your overall perspective here, you might say that this was either a good move or you might say that this was a bit of a cop-out, depending on how far Eri's power goes. But yeah. We'll leave the Eri part for the end of the video because that happened at the end of the chapter. We'll talk about the other parts before we get there, but that's my overall feelings, just anticlimactic. And then, of course, I'll explain it at the end. And mind you, it's not a bad thing. It's just like something I legitimately didn't expect. Anyway, the chapter overall, if we were to talk structure, I feel like it's kind of weird. I feel like it went all over the place. The structure itself, I don't think it's one of the better chapters of My Hero Academia because we have a lot going on, and with the introduction of Eri's dynamic here, we end up just covering a lot of material and it just ends up being a lot more hectic than you would expect it to be. It's kind of weird. Like, this is definitely my personal opinion on it. It's just reading the chapter, the structure itself just seemed really weird because we started off on a low energy situation. And it's pretty funny because that's what ended up happening with the girls, but we started off on a kind of resolved thing when the villain was originally captured. Then he has his second wind. We go through that whole procession. We have the reveal or explanation of Nejiri's quirk, and that's all right. We go through that. We then have Toga coming in as Izuku and then getting the girls into the position that they were in the last chapter, so they fall through the hole. Then we get the explanation from the villains and we spend the whole page on them. They talk a lot, so you have to take a bit more time on that page just to read through and understand what was going on in the situation. The villains try to make a move, and then we have the flash over to Izuku. Izuku's going in to save Eri. When Izuku's about to save Eri, of course Shizaki tries to make his grand escape. Everything's getting hectic at that point, and then Izuku engages in his regular way of saving people. Of course, Eri then triggers when she gets Lemillion's cape, and that's where her quirk goes out of control. And yeah, it's just we went through a lot. We went through a lot, and that's not counting also the flashback that happened right when Eri's whole quirk was activated. Overall, what I'm trying to say is like the pacing just was constantly changing because we would start from a calm situation, then we would escalate to a high energy situation, then we would come back down to a calm situation because you have to go through all the dialogue, and then the villains being there, they generally tend to be kind of jovial with the way they interact, and then we go back into a high energy situation with Izuku about to jump in with Eri, but then we have to go back down to the flashback to justify Eri's origins, and then we go to a kind of weird this might be a bad situation depending on what happens in the next chapter kind of feel. Overall, like it's an interesting chapter in My Hero Academia. I'm really interested to know what you guys overall thought about this chapter structure. But yeah, hectic. Hectic is I think a good word to describe what was going on here. Anyway, let's start breaking things down one by one, all the important bits. And the first thing I really want to start off with is the panel that we got showing quirk genetics. I think this is a really interesting panel, and I'm sure it'll be useful for people's theories in the future if they try to use it. The most important thing, the clearest thing that we got out of here is the idea that mutations are still happening in society. And this makes sense, right? Because the quirks themselves were initially a mutation. So to know that mutations are still in the game, it's good. It's good, but it shouldn't be something that came out of left field because, again, the quirk's origins come from mutations. So just seeing that mutations still happen, that's absolutely valuable to know. You know, initially I was thinking that this diagram could be a good indicator for the fact that quirks might skip a generation, like in the same way that two brown-eyed parents could have a blue-eyed child. I thought maybe, okay, could we get some indication that that's what's happening across generation lines? But unfortunately, looking at the diagram, it didn't give me enough evidence to make that conclusion. One half of the diagram makes it seem that might be the case, but then the other half doesn't corroborate it. So unfortunately, it's something that anyone that's a theorist with My Hero Academia could look at and use if they wanted to make any arguments based around quirk genetics. Overall, that was a pretty nice bit of information to have. Anyway, let's talk now about the chapter in its parts. The first part of the chapter was covering Ochiko and Tsuyu before they got into the main area of the hideout. That part, again, I don't think it's all that interesting. It's good to know that the girls have combat capability, but the only real worthwhile information that we got out of that was just how the quirks work, how Nejiri's quirk work, and I guess how the villain's quirk works. Because of that, you know, the first 5 pages aren't really that important when it comes to talking about them. The importance for that segment comes in when we get Toga impersonating Deku popping up. Now, of course, that part's absolutely important because we know what the villains are doing. The first thing I want to cover with Toga is that I wonder how much of Izuku's blood did she have to use to fuel that transformation, because we know that Toga has that constraint. How long she can stay in her transformation revolves around how much blood she ingested. I don't recall if she ingested blood from Izuku with this arc, but if she's using that little vial of blood that she had earlier, I'm really hoping that she burned through all the blood of Izuku's that she has. Ideally, she's burnt through all of it, but we really don't know. For all we know, Toga might be a super efficient machine in which a drop of blood could maybe power her for days. Let's pray that's not the case. But seeing Toga turn into Izuku is really, really a good thing because it means that she's depleting whatever blood supply of Izuku she has. That's a good thing. Now with the villains, we also got the reveal that they had Mr. Compress in their back pocket. So with the villains whole segment, you know, we spend that whole page. It's a very wordy page. We take a lot of time just to explain what Twice and Toga are thinking. We know that they dug a hole. We know that they're gonna mess with Shizaki. And it is pretty clever that they did have the time to dig a hole and have a spot where they're about to strike on Shizaki. I think that was pretty clever. Good on them for taking the time to do that. I assume that the whole digging mechanism was something that they used Compress for. He probably just compressed the surroundings so they got out. And I assume that there's only one Compress in here. The wording in the chapter makes it kind of hard, but we know that the Compress that we see with Toga and Twice is a copy. So my assumption is that they had him this whole time, and the reason that they didn't get caught by the truth detection that Nemoto has is maybe the wording wasn't set up so that they would get caught by it. Like, I know a good part of that was they were asking about Shigaraki's intentions, and this might be a case where Toga and Twice literally don't have any idea of what Shigaraki's intentions are, and this is just them doing it by themselves. And that seems to be what the idea is, since Toga did say that she wanted to surprise Shigaraki. Anyway, it's cool to see that they had a trick up their sleeves. And then with Twice, we use him to transition back into the scene with the heroes. Of course, he gets thwarted because Chizaki's about to make his escape, and at this point is where we get Izuku trying to run after Shizaki. Now, the one thing of interest with the Izuku part is just something calling to his characterization. When Izuku's trying to chase after Shizaki, he goes into his... he has to grab him this time for sure. The grabbing rhetoric is something that is very prevalent with Izuku's character because his whole thing is revolving around whether or not he can reach people, whether or not his hands can reach people when they really need it. So it's cool to see that popping up again with the character. It just reminds us that's a struggle for Izuku. And with this one, it's like, and this comes into like the whole Eri thing, you know, the person that ultimately saves Eri isn't really Izuku, it's kind of Eri herself, like the rescuee's power, right? Of course, Lemillion's also a big trigger for that because his cape comes out of nowhere and Eri grabs on for it. And at that point, it's just recognizing that Eri like cares about the heroes. That goes into the whole thing where it triggers Eri's quirk. Just to finish off Izuku, yeah, overall Izuku, you know, at the end of the day, he doesn't really save Eri in this chapter, but he's there to catch her when she falls. That's like enough of a save, but like this was Eri and Izuku's joint effort that got her away from Shizaki. So I don't know, would you take that as a victory or as a defeat for Izuku? Because it's not really by his power that he's doing things. He still requires help, and that's fine. That has to be a learning experience for Izuku. It's just very interesting. Anyway, let's talk about Eri's quirk, because this quirk is potentially ridiculous. The first thing I want to talk about is the fact that the quirk is described as something that rewinds. That's a very interesting word. Now, we don't know what exactly the word was in Japanese, and we do know that Manga Stream, because this is the site that I'm reading from, is kind of liberal with their translations. But if we assume it's actually rewind, rewind has a connotation that's linked to time in general. Like, we know what rewind means. It means go from one point and go into the past to some degree. Because of that, it adds another layer to what this quirk could potentially be doing, and it would mess with Night Eye's quirk because it's dealing with some aspect of time, if that is the full implication of the quirk. Now, we know some of the things about the quirk. We know that Eri's father pretty much disappeared when the father touched her, and then we have the aspect of Eri's body and how it can negate or destroy people's quirks. When you like put all these things together, it makes for something that's just, I really wouldn't have seen this coming, because I was in a whole other ballpark when I'm trying to think about what is Eri's quirk. Like, you know, I was hard into, it has to be something that works on negating people's quirks or destroying people's quirks. It has to be something that works on destruction, right? But then when you get this quirk and you're finding out that it rewinds, it's odd. Because now you have a situation where you have an emitter type quirk, and then you have a body that seems to do a slightly different effect than what the quirk seems to do. And I'm saying slightly different because like you can still argue it. You can still come up with an argument to say why it fits. It's so weird. Like, one thing you have to take into account here is that because it's an emitter type quirk, we see it emitting from Eri's horn. And then we know what her blood and her, like, whatever parts that they're using to make the serums, we know what they do. You end up with a situation of an emitter type and then a mutant body. And naturally you would say, well, yeah, of course she has a mutant shaped body because she has the horn. But I'm talking like a mutant body on a whole different level. Like, this is a mutant body where the components of the mutant body itself can be used to affect people, can be used to trigger change in people. That's kind of different. Like, you know, with the mutant shapes, we have the hard classical shapes like Tsuyu, and then we have the others who have secondary mutant qualities like Ochiko and Bakugo. Those two both have mutant bodies. But with Eri in particular, like, you're using the mutant body and you're extracting some kind of property from it, and that property somehow damages people's quirks. But when you look at the actual quirk that's being emitted, the emitted variation of the quirk does something like make a grown man disappear. And let's actually like try and like understand what happened with her father. Like, the first thing we have to ask is like, is it a physical mechanism that the quirk targets, or is the quirk targeting something on a metaphysical element? And if we're targeting something on a metaphysical element, at that point, that's where it becomes something that might interfere with Night Eye's general forecast or his predictions, right? Because it's either her father was reverted back to the state of non-existence, because that's rewinding. So he was rewinded past to when he was just conceived and then just became non-existence. Or did Eri just take out the fact that her father existed in general? In that second interpretation, then you have, well, you're messing with some aspect of the cosmology of My Hero Academia. Moreover, when we go into and look at what happened to Shizaki, Shizaki gets reverted to a state before he was fused. Now, that's important because it says, well, maybe that might happen to Mirio. Maybe Eri could revert Mirio back to a state before he had his quirk taken away. It's extremely possible because we see this kind of extreme situation happening with Shizaki. So if we are dealing with metaphysical elements, Eri's quirk quickly becomes a quirk that might interfere with predictions that Night Eye makes. And I keep referring to the predictions because right now Night Eye's predictions are still on the table, and we don't know what's going to happen past the situation. Because when you read the last box, triggering her awakening, that seems like it could be kind of ominous, and the chapter does kind of bias you into that line of thought because we see the bad consequences or actually all consequences are bad. We see the negative consequences of what happened when this quirk was last activated. That being, her father disappeared. She was disowned. She was put up and given to her grandfather. Because we have that negative connotation attached to the activation of Eri's quirk, are we potentially going to see something that's going to be kind of gruesome? Is something bad about to happen to Izuku? Is he going to be reverted to a point where he was covered in injuries? That would be scary. And then the last thing is, when you look at the last panel of Izuku, the effect that's being applied to him right now, it doesn't look healthy, for lack of a better word. So with Eri's quirk might be the quirk that can mess with fate, or this might just be the start of something much worse. But because there's also positive feelings triggering that quirk's activation, you know, it's one of those things we really won't know till the next chapter. Overall, guys, like, for me, this was a very interesting chapter. You know, not exciting because like there's just a lot of information that's being thrown at us, and now we still have a lot of things in play. We still have Shizaki in play. We now have a possibly dangerous quirk in play. We still have the predictions in play. We have the villain alliance in play, and we know what they're going after. There's a lot of moving parts here. We might still have a good chunk of conflict left here. But yeah, guys, let me know down below what you thought. Let me know what you think of the fact that Eri was the one that pretty much thwarted Shizaki in this. Let me know what you think of the quirk. Let me know anything like that. And I, you know, just want to make sure, like, didn't talk anything about Eri's emotional state in this, but you know, it is valuable that the girl felt she was safe and she wanted to go with the heroes. That's a valuable thing. Anyway, guys, let me know down below. And yeah, also on the Discord server, yes, it was a lovely subscriber that made it. I don't really know Discord that well, but it'll be a place to just hang out and kind of like talk about any topics that pop up. I'll try to make it a fun place. But yeah, I'll leave the link down below. Let me know what you think, and yeah, till next time, I hope you have a great day.